Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We know that you have other things that you could be doing tonight, like having dinner with your family or watching television or looking at YouTube. So we're just flattered that you're with us tonight. If this is your second event of the week, like even a bigger thank you. So tonight's event, the reason that we're hosting this is that you might remember that Katie and I were offering like one-on-one office hours appointments, and they're going on this week. But we booked out within 24 hours, and we thought, well, like how could we kind of speak to a larger audience that didn't get in on these meetings? So we thought we'd put together this guided trip FAQ, and in 60 minutes, we think we can cover a lot of material beyond what you even will be able to talk about in a 15-minute session. For this to work, or at least to work really well, we're going to encourage you to ask questions. So please use the chat. It's in the, you can use like the bottom, depends on what device you're looking at, but like the bottom right side, bottom right corner. Please ask us questions. That'll, we're doing this for you. So it would be helpful if we can answer your questions. A couple of reminders for what's going on right now. So through Sunday, actually, Katie, do you want to do these and then
Sure.
I'll get to the intro?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, through as Andrew was saying, through Sunday we have an awesome collaborative giveaway going on with Hyperlight Mountain Gear. So one very lucky winner is going to win a 5-day guided trip with us, along with a full backpacking kit from Hyperlight, including quilt, backpack, shelter, and some packing pods. So go to Andrew's website. You can enter there. The second thing I want to mention is that our third live stream this month is going to take place next Thursday on December 12th, and that's going to be an alumni panel. So we've invited 4 of our alumni on, and we're going to ask them some of the common questions you might be having, like how's the food? What were some of your fears going into the trip? Like, are the fitness levels really as described? Or any other questions that you can submit questions on a forum or be there live to submit questions. But we'd love for you to join that to hear about our trips in the words of our alumni instead of from Andrew and I. And then this coming Monday, the 9th, our open application period starts. And that goes until December 22nd. And if you apply during that time, you lock in your 2024 prices because they're going to go up after that. And then also, and maybe even more importantly, you get the trip that you most want. So all applications that come in during that 2-week period are weighed evenly. And then there will be spots after that, but it's more about like what spots happen to be available versus the spot that you are most wanting to get in. So that's what we have going on. Do you want to talk a little bit about before we go into questions, maybe like an overview of our program and maybe what makes us different in case anyone's new to our world?
I actually thought maybe someone would be willing to start us off with a question because I know like someone is sitting on the other side there, like they have a question that they want to ask.
Waiting to press.
Specifically came to ask the question.
If that's you, please enter your question now.
Started, right?
Be the first person, please interact with us.
Otherwise, it's going to be a 45 or 60-minute long discussion by Katie and me.
Yes.
Okay, so we thought perfect. Greg, are we in the same house? No.
Neither Katie, of us are, probably from, as each other or as we were last time? I'm imagining, wait, what do you think?
Yeah, well, we could answer both.
Okay. Well, the answer is no to both. I am not in the same house as I was earlier this week, yes, but not the live streams earlier in 2024. And you and I are not in the same house or the same town.
Correct. So Katie's out in Salida, Colorado, and I'm in Boulder, Colorado. And my house also changed. My wife and I moved back in February.
Okay.
The cats love our new place. Okay, so we thought maybe before we get into like some FAQs, we would just kind of like introduce the program a little bit. And Katie and I were talking about this morning. We're like, does this sound like too much of like boasting about our program? We're like, well, anyone who attends tonight kind of wants to know about our program. So I thought what I would do here is I'm going to present my screen.
Oh.
Not my photo. And I would like to kind of walk you through some of the, all the content's on the website, but the content can be a lot. So let me just kind of start. So like what defines our program is that we are using modern backpacking gear and technique. Like you won't look at us and say like, oh, it looks like they're stuck in the 1980s. All of our guides and like our trips sort of are have kind of this ethos based in off-trail travel and long-distance hiking. Um, all of our trips, regardless of the length or like the experience level, they all have both like a very strong education focus as well as a high level of adventure. So I think um, I don't think we're like, I don't think we're overstating when to say that like we do trips at a level that a lot of other organizations would never think about doing. Um, our trips also include a 10-week planning curriculum with the goal of both helping you learn to better prepare for your trips, but also its assurance that everyone shows up with what they need and properly prepared, which is the um, sort of the very first part of good expedition behavior. And then we also have this phenomenal guide team. All of our guides were, I would say that we were all like backpacking experts before we were ever guides. So just that time on trail, like the tens of thousands of miles of firsthand experience, and then we kind of leverage that into running guided trips. So couple of reasons, couple of ways that we're different. So we don't do tours. So like the skin on the back of my neck goes up when I hear like, oh, so you run like backpacking tours. I'm like, no, 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 no. Um, all of our groups are, or we want our groups to be client led. So like um, at their best, our trips or our guides will feel like more of like facilitators than they'll feel like guides. And then the last thing that we do is that we try to match our groups based on fitness and experience level and technical comfort. And that way the whole group kind of hikes at the same speed and hikes for about the same distance each day and has a similar perspective on risk. And we just find that those groups work a lot better and that they're a lot easier to manage than just accepting the first 8 or 10 paying customers who want to go on a specific trip. So we offer, let me get into this. So we offer 3 different levels of trips. We have level 1, level 2, level 3, and they're for beginners, intermediate backpackers, and for or advanced backpackers, respectively. Um, the the experience level, which is here, this doesn't correlate to fitness. So you can imagine, it goes lots of ways. So you can imagine like some like super duper fit ultra runner who's never been backpacking before. They sort of belong on this like beginner level course. And you also have very experienced backpackers who may not be that fit. So we don't we don't correlate those two. We decouple them. So in addition to these experience levels, we also have different fitness levels, which is here you go. And we offer 5 fitness levels. So 1 through 5, basic, moderate, medium, ultra high. And on this page here, we give you some ideas about kind of um, some specific numbers to use in this chart right here. But in general, these groups vary with how far they walk each day and over the course of a trip, how much vertical feet they do each day and over the course of a trip, how fast they walk, how um, the length of their breaks and the frequency of their breaks, and then finally like how difficult and how much off-trail travel they do. The other thing we kind of add in here is, and it's a little bit further at the bottom, it's just sort of an extra consideration. We look at technical difficulty or technical comfort, because you can also imagine that very fit ultra runner, this beginner level ultra runner, also never having traveled off trail before, never having scrambled, and they don't like heights. So we also kind of build that into our matchmaking as well.
Something I just want to emphasize, because this question came up a lot in my office hours this week, is that we offer lots of different fitness levels, or we offer, yes, that's the way to say it, several fitness levels in all of the different trip types. So Andrew said that, but I just want to emphasize that. Yes.
Can you more specifically like state like or give examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I was talking to someone earlier today who was talking to me. She's like, I would say I'm an intermediate backpacker. I've been out probably 45 nights, but I'm not very fit. So I'm thinking about applying for the fundamentals trip. And I was like, the fundamentals, like she was going to do the fundamentals 3-day or the fundamentals 5-day. And
Yeah.
I was saying, Well, because your experience level is intermediate, which is our adventure level, not fundamentals, I would encourage you to apply for one of our adventure trips, and then we will bucket you into the right fitness group. Because for our adventure 5 day trips, for example, we're most likely going to be offering, depending on the location, a basic through potentially ultra, depending on our pool of applicants, as long as we have enough to form a group. So, is that enough
That's great.
explanation?
Yep. Okay. So most of our groups are going to be mixed gender and mixed age. So outside of like that fitness level and the experience level and the technical comfort, otherwise we mix the genders, we mix the ages. We generally like mixed groups, but this year we're offering we're offering all women and 55 plus groups. And I think, Katie, we're going to talk a little bit about these
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and we can talk about the application form too. But basically, like it's not a if you're 55 plus, you don't need to take a 55 plus group. You can be with a mixed group. If you're a woman, you don't need to be on an all woman group. It's something that we're going to offer this year, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about that later, I think. Okay, so moving on. So we offer trips in 5 different locations. So we have Southern Utah, the Brooks Range of Alaska, the High Sierra, Greater Yellowstone, and in West Virginia. And we offer different types of trips in different locations. So for example, in Southern Utah, we're able to offer technical canyoneering courses. We can't offer those anywhere else. We just don't have the terrain for it. And then in Alaska, all of our trips are expedition level, so level 3. We don't offer any beginner or intermediate level trips in Alaska. Katie, do you want to talk about the itineraries?
Sure. So this year, do you want to go to that
Yep.
page? So on this itineraries page, we added this last year, and I think it's fantastic because it answers the question of like what will a typical day be like. So if you're wondering, what should I expect? I've never been on a guided trip, or I've gone with other companies, but I've never gone with you. What is a day like, and like what is the progression of a trip like? We have the itineraries for all of our trips listed out of just like generally. I mean, there's no interest. It really encourages the guides uh, to run their own trips. But these they're not super prescriptive, but this gives you like a general idea of what to expect for a trip. They're not scheduled out down to the hour, of course, but this is going to give you a good idea, a sense of like what it's going to be like if you go on an Alaska trip. So it'll tell you about, if you're having questions about, well, how does it work? Where do I fly in for Alaska? Do I meet you in the bush, or no, we meet in Fairbanks. So I would say if you're curious about any of the itineraries, check that page out. And then also on that page, this year we're doing these signature series trips. And how many do we have of these? 5, maybe 5 or
5 or
6.
6.
Yeah. So these are trips that are a little different. So the trips that are listed above that are sort of our classics. Those are like our tried and true trips that we've been running. We know they work well. And this year we wanted to do something a little bit different. And so we thought about routes that we really wanted to guide and that we were really, maybe places that we hadn't been or itineraries that were a little different than ones that we'd done before. And so we put together these signature series, and these are a little bit different because it's a prescribed route versus the other ones, which are more of like a tailor-made itinerary for the group. They're not recycled from year to year, but they're very custom to the group that go on them, those classic trips. And then the signature series are more of like, this is the route that we're doing, and we're looking for a group who will fit this route from a fitness level and from like an interest level. And so those are described in detail on that signature series page. So if you're interested in those, you can read through to get an idea of what those trips are going to be like.
Okay. Most of our group sizes, or most of our groups, will have 8 clients. There are a couple of exceptions. The fundamentals 3-day courses will have 10 clients. The Alaska expeditions will have 7, and then there's one trip this year that has 6 people, 6 clients. It's that High Sierra Peaks trip, which is expedition level 7-day trip. We mostly cater to adults, but Greg, your question is perfect. Are children allowed to join? I have a 14-year-old who would benefit from the process. We are open to kids coming on trips. It's we always kind of ask. We always like to have a discussion with the parents or the parent, making sure that that they're. I think the threshold for me is always like, well, will the child or will the kid like get something out of this, and do they want to do it? And that latter question is something that a conversation I always have with groups. It's like, hey, like I understand that you two or you three or you four all want to do this trip together, but like just make sure that everyone kind of wants the trip equally. There's a lot of preparation work. It's a pretty big commitment of time and resources. So we always want people to show up really enthusiastic and sort of equally excited to be there. Katie, you want to add anything more about the kids?
Mm-hmm. No, I think that covers it. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, of course they would be placed, according to like experience and fitness
Yep.
level, just like all other applicants. So they would need to meet those like thresholds.
Yep. Okay. So moving on, I'm not gonna talk about our guide team extensively. All their resumes are up here. Just as a general thing, though, like we specialize in like almost all the guides have quite a bit of personal firsthand experience on long distance trails and on high routes. So like, for example, like Brian Robinson, he's one of our longest standing guides. He was the first person ever through hike the Triple Crown in a calendar year. So he did the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail all in a single year. I think there are like 6 guides in the team that are Triple Crowners, so they've done all these trails. Other guides are a little bit more known for off trail stuff. So like Scott Christie and Katie Katie, I think like fewer than 20 people to have hiked the length of the Grand Canyon.
It's more than that now.
Is it more than that? Okay, so it's like low 20s. It's kind of like the Barkley marathons. Like the number goes up a little bit each year. So that's the guide team. You should check that out if you're interested in it. But I would just generally say like you're in pretty good hands with our team. And then finally, let's talk about the application process. So as Katie mentioned at the top, we start accepting applications next Monday, so the 9th of December. And for the first 2 weeks, it's an open application period. You can apply when it's convenient for you. All the applications are treated equally. And we kind of close that open application period on the 22nd because we have to review all of them. And then we start making groups. And this year we're expecting to start offering spots on trips the week of December 30th for Utah, Alaska, West Virginia, and then the following week, so the week of January 6th for California and Yellowstone.
Do you
Katie,
want to?
I know you want to say something. Yeah.
I was just going to say, do you want to go to the application page on there where just to show it is probably a more extensive application than if you've gone on guided trips elsewhere, if you even filled out an application with them. And we do have a PDF version of it available if you want to take a look beforehand, just so you have an idea of, what's going to be on there. There are no like trick questions or anything, but you may, want to take a look so you can think about your answers ahead of time. In terms of your preferences and things like that.
Yeah. So it is kind of lengthy. I mean, we take a lot, we pull in a lot of information on this application form. Yeah. And it is helpful, as Kay said, there are some questions in here that it will just help things go a little bit more smoothly if you've thought about it beforehand. So for example, share your most notable backpacking trips in 150 words or less, or what are your goals in taking a trip with us? So in that way, if you're a little bit more prepared, the application will go a little bit more quickly.
So we have a couple questions in the chat that we could take before we move on to the next section. So how likely is it that I will get my first choice of hikes? Is there an advantage to applying on December 9th? How do you do that?
Okay. So let's answer those kind of one at a time. So how likely is it that I will get on my first choice of hikes? So this would depend, I mean, overall, I'd say like pretty high, right? Like overall, pretty high.
Yes, I would say if you're applying for a trip where your experience level and your fitness level are appropriate, or at least your experience level, and that we're offering your fitness level in that location, I would say it's very high.
That's the key thing. If you're applying for an appropriate trip, and if we have sufficient demand to field a group that is a good match for you, then it's really high that we'll offer that trip. Where it gets tough, there are a couple of locations that get tough. Like Alaska's a pretty popular location for us, and we're just wary of adding like too much capacity there. So like 3 trips at a time, maybe 4 trips at a time is about as much as we'd feel comfortable doing. Whereas in a location, say like Southern Utah, we can run like 6 trips at a time and feel pretty good about our organizational capacity. So the locations where we have, if your first choice trip is in southern Utah, West Virginia, I'd say like your odds are best. If you're in California or Yellowstone, I'd say like the odds are still really good.
Mhm.
And then Alaska's probably seems to be kind of the toughest one.
Yeah, it's definitely the most
Yeah.
competitive. Yeah.
Now, if we can't offer you your first choice trip, we'll usually offer you like a second choice trip. And if you're flexible, like great. And there's always the possibility too of transferring or getting added to a trip later. We do have cancellations throughout the season. We always try to avoid them, but it seems like they're inevitable. So spots open up, and if you're willing to be patient, you might get that trip that you most want to do, even if even if originally you weren't offered that spot.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. So is there an advantage to applying on December 9th? No. But there is a huge advantage of applying between December 9th and December 22nd. And if you could do us a favor, not wait until the 22nd, because especially this year with it like leading right up into Christmas, so like at least sometime like early in the second week, that would be great. We'd appreciate that. And then as far as like I'm not sure what the question is, like how do you do that, but like how do you apply? You'll apply on this page right here. This link right here will take you to the application form. It'll be a Google form. It's pretty smooth. Okay, so then Micah Abrams asks, how many applications do you get compared to the number of spots on each trip? I'm not actually sure that's like the right way to look at it, Micah. So like what we actually do is when we collect all of these applications, and usually we're looking at like a couple of hundred applications during the open application period. What we do is we look at them and we review each application and we rank them by fitness and experience level, and then we try to kind of start bucketing them of like, hey, Katie, it looks like we have 16 people who want to do a 5-day adventure trip in southern Utah during session 1, and then they're all moderate. So we're going to do 2 moderate trips. So we basically just like we adjust the schedule around where the demand is.
Yeah, I think he's more broadly answered that question just a moment ago with talking about how much capacity that we have in each location. So some locations we have quite a bit of capacity to take as many applicants as want to go to that place, whereas in other spots like Alaska, we don't have quite as much capacity to run like endless trips, or we just don't want to.
Yeah,
because that's a lot of impact.
Which takes us to the next question from Zach. How selective will you be on signature trips for someone who's never done a trip with you before? So I'm not going to say no, but like all things being equal, we prefer just because of familiarity that we have some prior experience with them. And that doesn't apply, that applies not just to the signature series trips, but it applies basically to all the Alaska trips, and then like, and less forcefully, like basically like any of the longer trips. So especially like the 7-day trips, like if we have some prior experience with someone, like that is helpful. Whereas you can imagine we tend to attract like a pretty nice group of people, right? I think that's fair, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean,
absolutely.
like we actually like I have I've made a lot of friendships through our client base of like when I'm out on a trip, I'm like, gosh, like if you lived in Boulder, Colorado, we'd hang out regularly. So I know that's not like, it's kind of a non-answer, but yeah, all things being equal, we'd prefer to have experience, but we will consider individuals who with whom we don't have prior experience, and if they're really qualified, there's no reason not to take them. It's just a matter of how many other applications we have.
Okay, Armanouche asks, do most of your repeat clients progress through the trip types? When would you or would you not recommend repeating fundamentals or repeating adventure, etc.? So rarely do people repeat a fundamentals unless it's in a like exceptional reason, for like they want to go with a spouse who's not a backpacker or something like that, or take their kid or something like that. So usually people don't repeat the fundamentals. The adventure, since we have a 5 day and a 7 day, and we offer those in several different locations, it's pretty common for
Yeah.
people to repeat those. Maybe they do a 5 day in Utah and then they want to do a 7 day in the Sierra, and then the next year they want to do a 7 day in Yellowstone. A lot of times, the reason for that, I think, is just because it fits people's schedule. They want to go for a 5 or 7 day trip, and that works for them. Yeah, I think that's what I'd say about that. Would you add anything?
Yeah, I would just add, so the reason that we see that repeat client is, um, you know, our business model is to like teach you all the skills you need to do these trips on your own. But the reality is, for a lot of people, they just basically just have like more money than time. So they're looking for a turnkey experience, where they're like, look, I can just sign up for this. You tell me where to be, what to bring. You pack the dinner, the breakfast and the dinners. You pair me with 7 other really like fun, wonderful people. You pull the permits, you put together the route, and then like you send me out with 2 guides who are going to keep me out of trouble. So for them, it's just turnkey experience, even though they are capable of doing the trip on their own.
Yep.
Hey, Brock.
It's kind of okay.
Okay.
Should we keep cranking?
Yeah, I think so. Micah,
Okay.
so this question, I'm just matching up your questions. So how many applications do we get compared to the number of spots for the 11-day Alaska Brooks Range trips? Usually, um, uh, usually we get a few more than we need. I think is that, yeah,
Yeah, that's
like,
accurate.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and where we tend to, when Katie and I are like making the groups and figuring out what our schedule is, usually we like to have a little bit of extra demand. So basically, like, instead of having like 16 applicants who are all moderate and wanting to go to Utah, like we'd really prefer like 18 or 20, because I mean, it's actually kind of remarkable. Like, we'll send out an email and like we'll send out by email like, hey, we're offering you the spot on this moderate 5-day Utah trip, and like it's kind of like a surprising number of people are like, like between the time I registered and now, like my job changed, or my niece is getting married that weekend or something like that. So things just kind of change. So we like to have a little bit of a few extra numbers, and it's also like not economical for us to run trips at half capacity. So, okay, I think, Katie, let's go back to some of our questions until we get some more coming through the chat.
Yep, I think that'd be great. We have a lot that we could cover here.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about we kind of bucketed these questions into topics. So the first one I want to talk about is like common questions that came up about just like the preparation process for our trips. So Andrew mentioned the planning curriculum. So we have this 10-week planning curriculum. And so in terms of what's covered in that, it's actually really cool because it's a process that we walk you through for this trip that you're going to go on with us, but it's also a process that you could replicate for your own personal trips, and many people do, and I do as well for my personal trips. And so briefly, what's covered in that is we talk about like planning your trip. Well, that's very broad. So we talk about how to research the likely conditions, and we'll talk about gear selection. We talk about fitness and how to train. We talk about planning your food and guide you through that, and talk about how food works on our trips. Then we also do a whole module about route selection and mapping. So you'll learn how to download your maps for offline use. You'll also learn how to create maps in CalTopo. And then we also have a module that's about all sorts of different skill sets. That's like a lot of reading material in there about that. That's our planning curriculum. I think it's
Katie,
great.
I think it's important. So like 10 weeks sounds like, oh my gosh, like I don't have time for that. It's like, how many hours realistically?
What do we say? How many hours do we
Yeah.
say?
Yeah.
We,
The key thing here is that like it takes 10 weeks because we spread it out and make it manageable. But we say that we
okay.
estimate that your cumulative time commitment will range from 6 to 20 hours depending on your existing skill set,
Yes.
level of engagement, and history with us. And this range assumes that you join us for 2 video calls, each being about 30 or 45 minutes. Alumni and advanced backpackers will usually be near the low end of this range if you're new to backpacking. And if you like rabbit holes, you'll be closer to the high end.
Yeah. Okay. So another question that came up in terms of preparation is about gear. Like, how much equipment do I need? So I'll mention answer this a couple different ways. So you folks are responsible for bringing all of their own equipment, but we do offer a gear library where folks can borrow things from us, and we have a lot of different things in that gear library. We offer it for free to clients, and it's just like a first come first serve sign up process. So we have backpacks, we have shelters, we have trekking poles, stoves, compasses. We have a lot of different things in there. This is especially great if you're new to backpacking and you don't want to invest in all the gear yet. You can definitely borrow some of those bigger items from us. And then we also walk you through the gear choosing process really thoroughly. So we'll have you fill out a gear list. We'll provide a lot of guidance on like the expected conditions. You will feel prepared to fill it out. And then your instructor in the course will give you really thorough feedback. And I frequently hear afterwards that it's a lot of people's favorite part about like the planning process because they just like dial in their kit so much. They're like, that's amazing. I went from like a 30-pound pack to like a sub 15 base weight. So I would say it's very valuable. Do you want to do the chat or do you want to keep going on preparation?
I think we can, yeah, let's move to the chat. So Bart Phillips asks, how would you contrast a moderate 7-day trip in Utah to a moderate 7-day trip in Yellowstone?
Mm-hmm.
So the physical feel of both trips should be about the same. Like if we properly place you in a moderate group, and if we put together a proper moderate itinerary, at the end of the day, at the end of most days, you should feel like, oh, that was about right. I'm tired, but I'm not exhausted. I feel like I did some work, but I still can be chatty around the kitchen table. So the feel won't be any different. I think the big difference is just in the landscape. So Utah, it's going to be more off-trail travel because there's no trail system there. You're going to have the challenges of sand and sun and dry conditions. It's obviously a totally different aesthetic landscape, and there's basically no wildlife outside of the ones that might have been on your dinner plate tonight. So I'm specifically saying cattle.
Yes.
Yellowstone, Yellowstone's going to be different. Yellowstone, it's it's the big attractions in Yellowstone, at least the park, are the thermal features and the wildlife. And so we actually found one of the favorite things we did last year on our trips was that we kind of pull in a camp early, and then we'd get up high somewhere and we would just look for wildlife, which is not something that you do in any other location. But I mean, if you can see all this amazing wildlife in Yellowstone, and if it's around, it's around, you can hear them. Last year I had some elk keeping me up all night. One night I had a wolf howl of 200 yards out of camp. We had, and an hour prior to that, and a cow elk had gone through, mewing. So it's a pretty cool place. So I'd say the primary difference is more in the landscape than the physical part of it.
Agreed. Okay. Oh, my internet cut out. Did you say something?
No, I was waiting for you to.
You're waiting for me to say something? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long pause.
So okay. There's this question, Katie. Do we offer alumni-only trips?
We do not yet, officially.
I don't think we ever will.
No.
We don't want to be I'm a little reluctant to create a program that's are you in the club?
Right. Yeah. The exclusivity. Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. I will say, yeah, we don't officially offer alumni only trips, but a lot of our alumni self-organize into trips, which is cool. So yeah, not so far. TBD in the future.
Okay, Katie, how does someone know, they're am I a beginner, or am I an intermediate, or am I an advanced backpacker?
Yes. So I would say first reference that page that Andrew was at in the beginning where he was talking about trip types, but as kind of like a quick reference guide, I would say if you have spent less than 10 nights out camping, you're probably more in the beginner level, especially if you've only car camped or day hiked or maybe been out for one overnight or 1 or 2 overnights. And your gear is pretty much in the early stages. And then intermediate, I would consider like 10 to 50 nights, and then advanced would be like 50 plus nights. Good.
Yeah, and a kind of a similar question will be like, what is my fitness level?
Right. Sorry, I was reading the chat. Yes, so similarly, I would go to the chart because it's too much to like talk through verbally right here, but we lay out pretty distinct mileage windows as well as how much vertical gain you should expect to be able to do in a day and like the high range, like the outer limits of that. And so I would say base that on your past backpacking trips. I think that's the absolute most valuable thing that you can go off of to determine what fitness level you fall into is, what felt comfortable to you on past backpacking trips. The more data you have, the better. If you've never been on a backpacking trip, we covered this in our chat on Tuesday about how to choose a backpacking trip in 2025. But I would say if you don't have the data yet, go out on day hikes and see, track the distance and the vertical that you can do in 8 hours and do it in different types of terrain and different weather. And you'll start seeing, a trend there.
With both of these questions, it's like, on the application form, we're asking you to essentially to rate your experience level by virtue of like which trip you select, but we're also asking you to self-rate your fitness. And we ask you that, but we don't take your word for it. So like we're on the other end looking at all of like the more granular details, saying like, oh, okay, like, yeah, this person hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah, that probably puts them in like advanced category. Whereas, this person has spent only 5 nights out on 2 separate trips. They were both in the same location and they were 10 years ago. This person's probably a beginner. So we're also coming up with our own assessment. And I think the key thing, what you should do when you're applying is just be really like honest and transparent with the information that you give us and just trust that the process will work. Katie, how many applications did you review last year?
Oh, gosh. I mean, last year, she's
It's like
500.
500.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah, plus the year before that, and the
Yeah.
year before that, and the year before
So,
that.
so like between Katie, like, we have reviewed thousands of applications between the two of us. And we kind of know what this stuff looks like. So just be like really honest with the information you give us. Trust that the process works. We'll get you on a trip where you're a good match that feels appropriate for you.
Yeah, and I would add to that, like, just the more data you can provide when we ask you that question, the better we can place you. And if you have questions for us, put that in the anything else box at the end of the application, and Andrew and I will reach out to you.
Okay, let's just jump into so we got a few things in the chat. So Corey Van Hort, he's one of like the originals, 2011. This was a 7-day trip in Yosemite. I think it was the back then we just would do Yosemite A, Yosemite B, Yosemite C.
Oh, that's
It was
amazing.
it wasn't like 3F. And so Corey was on a trip. He was on a 7-day trip. Amanda was on that trip. Amanda and I were
Oh,
not married yet. We weren't even
oh
engaged
wow,
yet. Yep. A couple
that's
of
what won her
other
over.
yeah. Do you remember the name Krishna from like a year or
Mm-hmm.
two ago? He was
Mm-hmm.
on that trip. Albert Kim, one of my the late Albert Kim was on that trip. Yeah. So fun to
Reminisce.
reminisce. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about logistics. So, Katie, talk to us about the food. How does all that work?
Yes, so we provide breakfast and dinners for everyone, and then you or the client is responsible for bringing everything that happens between breakfast and dinner. So all your snacks and lunches and any drinks that you want, including coffee and tea and things like that. We do accommodate dietary restrictions. We'll ask you about that in that classroom process that you go through. We have had, we can accommodate people who are vegan or vegetarian or like I'm gluten free, and we always have gluten free meals that our operations manager, Alan, he's awesome about that. So we can definitely accommodate that. And if you actually, I talked to someone earlier today on office hours, she was like, I'm just really picky and I want to bring all my own food. That is also completely fine. So that's how food works. So you carry your individual breakfast and dinner rations and also part of the group food. And that usually ends up probably being, I would say, maybe a pound or a pound and a half of group food, depending on the length of the trip.
Katie, someone asked this yesterday during office hours. They said, so how much does the group food weigh? Was the
Mm-hmm.
question. And I think what's the way that it works, so yes, we supply the breakfast and dinners, but you're expected to carry like you're given an individual ration. So for example, you're given a bag with beans and rice in it. But then there's also a group serving of cheese and Fritos that someone else is carrying. So it's a little bit of like a winner take all scenario, like around meals, because if you happen to have the group ingredient that is needed, like you just got rid of like a half a pound out of your backpack.
Right.
And which is why like early on, I'll give you the tips. So like you should
Oh,
start
don't give the secret
lobbying
away.
like within the first hour of the trip, start lobbying like, hey guys, like what do we have for dinner tonight? I'm thinking like something with cheese sounds really good tonight for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so as far as the weight portion of that, so for the individual rations per day, I think it's like 10 ounces worth of
Hmm.
individual rations with breakfast and dinner combined,
Yeah.
plus for the whole trip, probably about a pound-ish, maybe a little bit more than that of group food. And then I want to also answer this from Starfire Farm question asked about cooking responsibilities. That's a great question. I meant to answer that. So each person brings their own stove and cooks individually. We just all cook the same meal at the same time for breakfast and dinner.
Okay. Crystal, we're going to get to your question in a second. Let me, it's actually like the next topic. So just a couple of other logistics things. So as far as like traveling to and from the trailhead, you're responsible for that. So usually we meet. The only exception is Alaska. So Alaska is a little bit different. But we all meet at either the trailhead or a spot very close to the trailhead, and you're responsible for your transportation there. It's usually the case that a lot of other people are traveling to that location as well, because it's not just your group of 8 people, but it might be several other groups of 8 people as well. So we set up a room and ride sharing platform, and a lot of people just kind of coordinate their travel, and that adds a lot of fun and it helps reduce the cost as well. The final logistics question, we've gotten this a few times. Are there resupplies on the 11-day trips? And the answer,
No,
yeah, the answer it's kind of a no. At this
probably
point,
not.
it's a no for all of them. We'll once we have our permits, we'll reconsider it just to see like, well, is it practical? But yeah, if you're going to do an 11-day trip, just expect that you're going to be carrying pretty heavy food load early on, and with that, know that like early on, the trip is paced accordingly. So like you should not expect on day one of an 11-day trip to be hitting the expected mileage. You know, Okay, let's talk about these 55 plus and all women's groups. So, Katie, I think the key question here is, or the first question is like, why are we doing these trips? And maybe take them on separately because I think our rationale is different.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just go in that order. So the 55 plus trips, this has come about, well, I would say broadly, both of them came about due to requests that we've been having from people that I've heard on many trips from clients. So we, I think, finally heard it enough that we're like, well, why don't we offer this? So for the 55 plus trips, I have heard several clients or prospective clients have the concern of like, am I too old to backpack, or I don't want to be with a bunch of like 20-year-olds. And that also that kind of goes hand in hand with that is like, I don't want to be the slowest on the trip, which we've already talked about why that wouldn't happen because we group people with matched fitness levels. But some people just want to backpack with other people who are around the same age as them. So that's why we're offering the 55 plus is because we've had people express, hey, I kind of just want to be with some people who are in my age group, and I'll feel more comfortable with that. Would you agree with that?
Yep, that sounds
Okay.
right.
Okay. And then
By the way,
the
I'll just interject. I feel bad for Troy, who just came home from work and immediately had to go into the bedroom.
on Tuesday night when we were doing it, he sat in his truck outside for like an hour. Like, I'm sorry, we have a small
I might
apartment.
need to buy
Yeah,
him dinner.
I know. Okay, the women's only trips. These ones we're doing for the same reasons I just mentioned in terms of like having requests for that. But also, I think that maybe particularly for women, that there's an element of like feeling more comfortable when they're in a group of all other women when they're in that learning environment. So we wanted to offer that to see, yeah, to see if I mean, never mind. I'm not gonna finish that sentence. Just see if it's like to see how all these trips go because some of these are like we're the signature series. This is the first time where we're offering them. Same with the 55 plus and the all women. So we'll see if it resonates with people. But I have a feeling that it will because I've heard that request from a lot of women. So that's why we're offering that one. Is just to kind of create a more comfortable environment to help more women feel comfortable in the outdoors.
Yeah. So the key thing with both of these trips, so if you are interested in a 55 plus trip, or if you're interested in the all women's trip, the key thing is just on the application, just say that you are, because then then we can kind of take a look and say, all right, so Katie, remember those 16 people who all want to do a moderate 5-day trip in Utah? It turns out that 8 of them want to do a 55 plus group. Well, like, perfect. So we're gonna batch them up. So the key thing is just kind of like during the application form is just like knowing people's interests, and that way we can pair everyone and kind of create the best result overall for all the applicants.
Yep.
Okay. And then there's this other question of like, so is there anything different about like the regular 5-day trip and the 55 plus trip?
So, other than it being 55 plus, I would say no. Well, okay. I'm going to say no, but I will qualify that. It's still going to be a group that will be matched in terms of their fitness levels. And it's still going to be like we will create a route that is customized to that group and their interests based on that fitness level. However, the kind of like caveat to that is that since it's a 55 plus group and what we've seen in like the trends from past applications, I would say that I expect the fitness level for that to probably be the moderate level if we form like one of those groups in each location. I could be wrong about that. Maybe we get a bunch of like high level 55 plus year olds. That could happen. But if like past applications the trend continues, I would guess that like that's going to kind of dictate the fitness level a little bit.
Yep, I think that's right. I bet most of them end up being moderate. Some of them might be basic. Some of them might be medium.
Yes. Okay. Should we move on to the signature series? We have one question about these trips that came in, and that was who's a good fit for this Peaks trip? And so I think you can answer that one briefly. So someone who I would say, so it's going to be a
We should define what is the signature series Peaks trip.
Yes, so that one is in the Sierra, and it's going to be a trip that's more focused on like actual peak bagging, as they say. So like going like hitting summits. Right now, it's proposed to have 3 summits on it in this 7-day trip. That's what the peak bagging trip is. It's more like summit focused, and it'll be a good chance to learn sort of those like alpine scrambling skills. It's not a technical climbing course at all. There'll be no like technical gear, ropes, harnesses, or anything like that. There will possibly be maybe like webbing or something if that's needed for protection.
Helmets. I bet helmets too.
Mm-hmm. So yes, so that's the peak strip, and then who's a good fit for it? I would say it's someone who's already very comfortable with exposure, in terms of like feeling like you're exposed like drop offs. If that term's not familiar to you, or comfortable with heights, I should say, and who has some experience doing that type of thing, maybe like class 2. Is it familiar with like what class 2, 3, and 4 are? But wants to learn to get better at it under the guidance of the guides.
Okay, so Katie, just as a time check, so we're at 48 minutes. So I bet why don't we do like a hard stop at 60, kind of wherever we are. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So the next subject that we want to talk about, assuming that we don't get more questions through here, is we want to talk about Alaska. I think Katie and I have spent probably half of our office hours meetings talking about Alaska.
Yeah, for sure.
And which is, it's fine. I understand the appeal of Alaska. I love Alaska trips. And I think part of the reason we're probably asked a bunch of questions about it is just because there's so much sort of mystery, as opposed to like, the lower 48 locations just are, even if you've never been to say Southern Utah, it just feels more familiar because you know where that state is. Yeah. So Katie, tell me, like, what are the Alaska trips like?
Well, it's usually buggy. You'll have wet feet all day long. You'll walk over.
Sell it, Katie. Sell it.
You're going to walk over some very rugged terrain. Yes. So there are challenges too. I would say I would definitely encourage anyone who's interested in our Alaska trips to read that itineraries page. Is that where we talk about? No, it's the trip locations page. Yeah. We talk specifically about like each location, what appeals to us in that location, what the challenges are in that location. And I really would encourage everyone to read that if you've never been to that place and you're thinking about it, because like maybe you hate sand, so you probably shouldn't go to Southern Utah, for example.
And just importantly, like I don't write or speak in hyperbole, so
This is true.
anything that anything that anything that's up there is like that's it's real.
Hmm. I agree with that. Yeah. So Alaska is, I think the really a few of the really big appeals of it is the remoteness. It's incredible. You're in the northernmost range in the United States. You're above the Arctic Circle. There's 24 hours of daylight at the time of year that we're there. There are no trees growing up there. There's some willows in the drainages, but there's mostly it's open tundra with these huge glacial valleys and these giant peaks. Usually there's great wildlife. Sometimes, well, often far away, but if you
No
have a,
trails.
yeah, no trails, no roads. And the whole experience of getting out there is incredible as well. It's like the bush flights and hiking into the small village that we go to. So it's really an experience. And I think that's what's very appealing to people, but it does come with its challenges.
Yep. Let me keep going on these questions about Alaska. So how competitive, we kind of talked about this a little bit
Mhm.
earlier, but yeah, the Alaska trips are generally, historically, they've been competitive.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, um, we're not running a huge program up there. So it's just, there are only so many spots and that's what it is. Sandy asks, do we do point to point or do we do loops in Alaska? So Sandy, normally we do point to point itineraries in Alaska. So that the usual itinerary is that we all meet in Fairbanks. That's where we do our orientation, and then we fly into the bush on either a plane that has tundra tires, and we land on a gravel strip. And it's like not a maintained gravel strip. It's literally like the river laid down a bunch of gravel here, and the gravels are small enough that they can land this plane on it. Or we can also land on lakes. So those planes have floats on them. So we get dropped off, and then we walk for like 7 days or 11 days. And usually we finish our trips in a small native village that's in the park. And there's an airstrip there, and we can get a twice a day flight back to Fairbanks. And those flights have 9 passengers each, so we're not. It's pretty wild. Even like that flight is.
It's so cool.
Yeah, yeah. So that's competitive. As far as the question, like, am I fit enough? We Our like minimum fitness for Alaska is moderate. We just kind of can't practically run basic level trips in Alaska. It's just kind of the terrain is just kind of too rugged there. And then as far as eligibility, it's not essential that you do a lower 48 trip with us before Alaska, but it certainly is helpful. Um, like last year I bet like probably 2/3, probably about 2/3, maybe even 3/4 of our clients were past alumni, and the new clients all came with really good hiking resumes. So like I had one group where 6 out of the 7 people on the trip had hiked the Pacific Crest Trail,
Hmm.
and that didn't necessarily set them up like perfectly for backpacking for 7 days in the Brooks Range, but like I knew that they knew how to set up their shelters, they knew how to take care of themselves in tough conditions. I knew that that their bodies knew how to walk, and that was sort of like good enough for us. And then there's another question too. I've heard this one twice this week. If I don't like mosquitoes, what session should I sign up for? And I usually say, like, and Katie, you can back me up on this, but like we generally don't see bad mosquitoes. Like, and if we do see some tougher mosquitoes, it's usually in the second session.
It's
We're
true.
Yeah, like we kind of we time these trips to start just after like the high snow melt, like all the big snow melt, or the river volumes come down from snow melt, and then it's before things really green up and the bugs come out. So we're in kind of this narrow window.
I don't want to give people the entirely wrong impression though that it like couldn't happen because I
Sure.
have very clear memories of like wearing a head net and like
Yeah,
pulling it up to eat and putting it
yeah,
back down, like mosquitoes being that bad. I wouldn't say that's the norm, but like that can happen certainly.
yeah. Katie, what was the worst year you remember for mosquitoes?
I think it was the trip that you and I guided together out there.
Oh,
So was
really?
that
That was the worst that you were in? It was
22?
2022. It was the
I think it was
one, yeah,
22.
2022.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't even think that was that bad. My worst ever was it was 2023. Yeah. If you
Oh.
rate mosquitoes like levels like 1 through 5, like
Mm-hmm.
they were like there was one day they were solid level 4, like all like
Whoa.
basically the whole day. Yeah, and
Oh
like
man.
um but it was just one day, and then like then the next day we were it was like windy and we didn't see a bug the whole day. So yeah. Okay, couple of other things. So Greg asks, are the trips dependent on obtaining permits? So yeah, I guess yeah, they all are, or not all of them, but so we need two different types of permits. We need a commercial permit so that we can run like guided trips in a specific area. Any of the locations that we've been talking about, like these are permits that we've held for a long time. Usually we have to reapply every single year. So for example, Yosemite National Park, we've been operating there for a long time, but every year we have to reapply for it. Um, and then in addition to the commercial permit, we also need wilderness permits, just like any of you, if you go out in a private party. Oh, Katie disappeared. And we're competing for the most part with private parties for the same wilderness permits. We have a few little tricks. Nothing that is here she comes back. So we have a few little tricks to get the permits that we want. We're a little bit more flexible um, than a lot of other groups would be to get the permits that we want. Crystal asks, she says, Katie, what's the snake situation in Utah?
What's the snake situation in Utah?
Yeah,
They exist there, but I've never actually
never,
seen a snake there.
never.
I think I heard one of our guides say they saw a snake once, but
Hmm.
I don't know if I can believe
And
it.
last year, while I was peeing, I looked down and saw a rattlesnake rattle.
Oh,
So
huh.
yeah, that's the only way I know rattlesnakes are there because of that. But I've never seen one.
Yep, me either.
Okay, let's we have a couple more minutes, so let's jump into
Okay.
some of these miscellaneous questions. So Katie, if someone wants to apply for multiple trips, what do they
Yes.
do?
Yep. So there's a place where you can select that option on the application. So you can let us know that you do want to apply for multiple trips. We're definitely open to that, but we do our best to offer everyone who applies at least one trip. So if we have a group where there's only a limited number of spots, we will try to offer, a location in a group where there's only a limited number of spots. We will offer, if someone hasn't had even one been put on one trip, we will offer them before we offer a person a second spot. But often we can accommodate that depending on the locations where people want to apply for.
Yeah, and if you do want if you do want a second trip and we can't offer you one initially, or even if or the other similar situation, if we can't offer you your top choice trip, just be patient with us a little bit. Like I mean, truth be told, like it's in our best interest to put you on a trip, so we're going to try to do that. Especially if if you're qualified, it's in our interest to put you on the trip. So we have cancellations. It always happens. So if you just be patient with us a little bit, we can almost always get you on the trip that you want to get on. Yeah. Okay, next question. So for the Sierra 5-day trips, how much off-trail travel versus on-trail travel do you do, and does it depend on the fitness level?
So in the Sierra, particularly, it's a fantastic place for off trail travel. So I don't know that I've ever put a percentage on it, but I would say you could expect to be off trail for like 50% of the time. Does that feel right to you? Have you?
I would say like first day and last day are almost always on trail, um,
Mm-hmm.
and then the middle days, um, I don't know what the ratio is, but it will feel like you're off trail a lot more than you're on.
Yeah.
Usually, like I don't know how many groups I've had where like they touch trail for the first time in like even just a day and a half, and they're like, oh,
Right.
thank God,
The walking
oh,
is so
this is so
easy.
nice.
Yeah, totally. Yes.
I never thought I'd like hiking on trail so much. Yeah,
Agreed. And as far as the fitness levels, so all groups will get like off trail travel experience, at least some of it. Does it depend on the fitness level? Maybe like it correlates
sure.
a little
Yeah,
bit,
it does.
yeah,
Yeah.
because people who are on like the lower fitness levels are just not traveling as many miles and have less opportunity to get out into the place. Okay, ready to move on?
I'm going to finish Katie's sentence because she cut out there. She was
Oh,
saying that the less fit groups don't hike as far each day and kind of can't get out as far into the areas where those off trail opportunities exist.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you're okay now. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to move on, or do you want to wrap up
Yeah,
here?
well, I just want to add, we need to get to the best question on that we received. So, during a Yellowstone 5-day trip, I want to encounter all wildlife forms except for humans. No offense. How quickly do we leave the tourists behind, and when will we see wildlife?
I'm gonna let you take this one, Andrew.
Yeah, so like Yellowstone, it's a park, but it's not a petting zoo. So, we will leave the tourists behind basically as soon as we walk away from the trailhead. They're like, you might see some day hikers maybe on the first day, like the first half of the first day, and then that's it. So then beyond that, it's just backpackers. And then as far as the wildlife go, I mean, there's some areas of the park that have more wildlife than others, and there's some areas of the park that have better visibility than others. If you want to see wildlife, though, you have to be looking for them. So that's why one of the things we started doing in Yellowstone is like having those wildlife watching tours, like after dinner, especially after dinner, like or in the morning. That's when the wildlife are most active. And um, a lot of our trips are kind of like miles based or miles focused. Like let's like explore and see all these cool things, and let's get out far. In Yellowstone, we've actually found it's a little bit better to like slow down and take in the place a little bit more.
Hmm. Can we do one more? I want to finish on this last one
Yeah.
because I think it's a good broad invitation for what I want to share. So the question is, do you take into account a previous client's experience when considering their placement on a future trip? For example, suppose their trip wasn't strenuous enough or that they didn't mesh with a guide. So yes, we definitely would take into account a client's previous experience, and we would invite you to share that with us. There's a box on at the end of the application. There's a question that says, "Is there anything else you want to tell us?" If you have a preference of like if there's whatever it is, like that exact thing, like, hey, I wish I felt like my last trip with you wasn't strenuous enough, please consider that for this upcoming application. We want to place you on the trip where you're going to be most happy, so please just communicate to those things to us. Andrew and I are very approachable. We want you to have a good time, so I would say that for all applications.
Yeah, I mean we're running a service here, but our primary goal is giving you a great experience. So we really encourage you to let us know what your needs are and what your preferences are, so that way we can satisfy them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much for joining us tonight. If hopefully we see some of your applications starting on Monday. And if you haven't applied by then and still need some further convincing, or if you just want to learn a little bit more about the trips, remember that alumni panel next Thursday night. We're going to have 4 alumni who've been, some of them have been with a lot of trips, and some of them have been with just a few trips. So they'll add some perspective. And importantly, Katie and I won't be controlling the narrative that night.
That's
So,
right. You'll listen to someone other than us.
yeah. All right. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.